Thank you for asking me because I love talking about it. But I'll tell you what, it really angers me whenever we don't appreciate all of God's efforts for our salvation. We are so stupid. Never mind.
Noah. Thanks, Glenn. I'd like to hear some of those jokes about angels. Maybe I'll ask you afterward. But my question is, do you have any remarks on Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, and sort of the framework that he has put together about the spiritual realm and the origin of the Nephilim? And I realize there's a whole lot there to address, but it is something which I find more and more people reading his book and seeking his resources, and they get very wrapped up in the spiritual warfare ideas that he presents. So do you have any remarks on that?
Yeah, I do. One of the popular during the last 50 years, a bestseller was written by Angels by Billy Graham, and there's been all kinds of articles written about angels and stuff like that, and they are mostly just pure supposition. There's very few that are really, whenever I started doing research, there were only a couple that I could even kind of recommend. Peters wrote a book on a study of angels. It's pretty good. He sticks basically with scriptures. There's another book by Travis Quartermouse, I believe is the way his name. It's German. And this guy is still alive. He lives in Missouri. And you can get his book, but it's very hard to get. It's basically only from Harding. You can get it in their bookstore. Or from our brother if he gets some. But anyway, this is a good book on the hosts of heaven. By the way, what do you call a whole bunch of angels? They're called a host. That's what they're called, hosts of heaven. Anyway, I just don't like reading after guys who just want to, just suppose or guess or dream about all the things done. God reveals to us what we need to know. They exist. They have a work. They work for the sake of those who will inherit salvation. They were created to help us spiritually succeed in whatever way that is. And yet we don't thank them, we thank God. So they are spiritual creatures that help us spiritually succeed. And he tells us to put on the full armor of God so that we will be able to stand. He doesn't tell us to ask angels anything or to pray to them or to depend on. He tells us to pray to God. And that's what we're supposed to do. And angels have their work. I'm sorry, I didn't read everything, but I did read that book, but I thought it was a lot of supposition.
Well, I think you've made a great point right there to remember. If there's anything we learn from Hebrews, it's that mankind is the center of all these goings on. It's not angels, and it's not the battles that angels are fighting, and we're on the periphery. But in fact, humanity is at the center of that. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
It's God desired to save man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I confess it's not a topic that I've given an incredible amount of thought to. Certainly not to the extent that you have, and I regret that I haven't. A couple of us were talking the other night in the Waffle House, and I was rather tired, so I'll blame it on that. But I figure if I have this question, then some other yokel will have this question too. Do angels have souls?
The Bible speaks. The Bible calls them spirits. Are they not ministering spirits? And the Bible argues in 1 Corinthians 5, and that there is a spiritual body. And I don't know, but I know they don't die. They don't have a place that they're kept awaiting a resurrection or anything like that. So they're spiritual creatures with spiritual bodies that are greater in power and might than the one we have in this flesh. But whenever we end the resurrection, we're going to have a greater body.
George?
So I have three questions. First of all, in Matthew 18 and verse 10, Jesus was speaking about the little ones. If anyone despises one of these little ones, he says, to beware of doing that, because their angels always see the face of God.
Right.
And this is the verse that's used to try to defend the idea of guardian angels.
Right. But children die. It may be spiritual protection. Go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to ask, the way I understand this, just want to run it by you and see what you think about it. But my understanding is that what the passage is teaching is that the word angel there in Matthew 18, verse 10, is speaking about the spirits of these little children. And when they die, they go to heaven, they go directly to heaven, and they behold the face of God. And I base that on Acts 12 and verse 15, when Peter was standing at the gate of Rhoda's house. He's knocking on the gate, and she runs and she says, Peter's outside the gate. And they said, no, it's his angel.
It's his spirit.
And I think when they said that, they meant it's his spirit or his ghost. So it looks to me like in Acts 12:15, the word angel is being used to mean a person's spirit. And I take that to be the same in Matthew 18, verse 10. I just wanted to ask you your opinion about that.
I think you're right. I think they were surprising. They were guessing as to what was at the door, that it wasn't Peter himself, it was his spirit, whatever that was. It may have been his ghost. It may have been, some commentators say it was his guardian angel that was telling them, that Peter had been released or whatever, his messenger. I think that I don't know. Is there a way you feel confident with?
Well, I've never understood the concept of a guardian angel guarding us spiritually or physically. If they're guarding us physically, why do people get hurt?
Right. And
if they're guarding us spiritually, why do people sin and fall away? I don't know the answer to all of this. I don't understand the concept of a guardian angel. And it just looks to me like that these passages are talking about the spirit of a person is being described as an angel, or the word angel is being used to describe their spirit. So,
if you're asking, it's hard for me to stay out of speculation on this issue as well. And one of the things that they said was, well, if Lazarus had angels that accompanied him in death, when a child dies, there are angels there as well, and those angels are ascribed. The reason why there's so many of them is that God gives every person an angel or a troop of angels. There's all kinds of speculation about what that might be. But spiritually, in Daniel's case, he said, I prayed to God, and the angel says, I was prevented on coming, but I finally got to come, and now I'm going to have to go back and fight him some more. That may be a way that we're spiritually protected. Or when we pray for, Lord, I pray for my kids, that you keep them from temptation, keep us from temptation. Well, angels may have a work in that. We don't know. We'll find out someday. But if it helped Daniel in that situation, that could be just a guess. But God does not explain it to us. He just tells us, thank God and pray to God. But I mean, in other words, I don't know what all they do. But I do know they have a work. And whatever it is, we're not supposed to thank them directly for it. We're supposed to thank God.
Okay, so my next question is concerning the seven angels of the seven churches in Revelation 2 and 3. Are these angelic heavenly angels, or are they messengers of the churches, or human?
Yeah. My understanding, the only thing that keeps me from going full hog wild on this is that he says the angel, that rather than a pair of them, a pair of angels to the churches, as I gave instruction to the angels of the churches. If it was talking about elders, why wouldn't he use the plural? And that has always kept me back from saying that this is elders or messengers of the church, human messengers. But spiritual representatives is what I get out of it, basically at this point in time. And if it were the elders of the church that were given to give that message to the church, then why did he name two of them? That's the only argument. Does that help?
Okay, what you described, a heavenly messenger, heavenly angel, is the common view in commentaries. The problem I don't understand is, how can this angel be held responsible for how that church is acting? In other words, unless you repent, and the word "you" is singular, it's like that angel is being spoken to. He's being held responsible, and unless you repent, I'll remove your candlestick. And it looks to me like that this is more of a human messenger. I take it to be like chapter 1, verse 3, blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the book of this prophecy. You have a reader and you have the audience listening to the reader. And it looks to me like that the reader is being held responsible to make sure that this message is being read to the audience at Ephesus, at Smyrna, and so forth. And so I take it to be a human messenger. But I just
Have you
wanted to run that by you and see your thoughts on that.
Well, no, whether it was, I'm sure if it was sent to this church, it would be the elders that would be giving that message anyway. It would be a singular, speak one at a time, and that, if you don't have an interpreter, keep quiet. So they could read that as a message from the Lord through a messenger to the churches. So there is a lot of arguments to say that he's talking to the elders of the church. That's the only argument I've heard against the elders, was why didn't he use the word plurally and singularly there?
Is that your third question?
No, my third question was distinguish between.
Come back to you.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate your talk very much, Glenn. The more questions that get asked, the more comments I want to add, and I guess I've got to be careful here. I'll get over my time here. But just on George's point, I don't know why the word angel there, angelos, can't be taken in just the classical sense of the term, messenger.
Right.
And whoever delivered those letters, elder or not.
To the messenger of the
so,
church, yeah.
So anyway, you guys can hash that out. I'll just throw it out
Well,
there.
whoever's going to read this letter. I mean,
Yeah. But I had a comment, and then that was not it. I have a comment and a question.
Okay.
The feminized angel is kind of an interesting idea. Recently, I've been reading a book called The Toxic War on Masculinity, which has nothing to do with angels, other than the book is authored by a woman, coincidentally or ironically, and she makes a very good case for some of the poisonous ideas that are out there on gender issues relative to male and female, and the toxic war on masculinity, as she calls it. But she makes an argument in there that, it's a long story, but make it quick, that the Industrial Revolution took the man out of the home, took the husband out of the home. And throughout the 19th century, and you can read this, you come across this a lot, that the woman in the 19th century, or the wife, or the lady of the house, was elevated to this high moral standard where she was kind of played the role of taming the man who's gone out into the dog-eat-dog business world. And so the woman kind of becomes moralized over the man, And she makes, the author, Nancy Pearcey, makes the case that the feminized angel, that's when the feminized angel shows up in pictures and popular ideas about angels, is when, in that period when the woman was supposedly elevated to a higher place than man. I just think that's kind of an interesting thing. I thought I'd throw it out there. But my question is, Hebrews 1 and verse 14, are they not all ministering spirits sent forth for to minister for those who will inherit salvation? Could you comment on the view that the ministration of angels there is limited to their activity in the Old Testament and the bringing in of the law? You know, like Acts 7, what is it? 7, forget the reference, 52 or 3 or along in there. The law sent by the direction of angels, or the ministration of angels, or I think the old version says. I don't know. I'm just curious if you could comment on that.
No, I've heard that view, and I looked at especially chapter 2, verse 1 through 4, where he's talking about how the old law was transmitted, and then he contrasts it to has in these last days spoken unto us by his Son.
Yeah.
So the angels definitely in some way were involved in the transmission of the Old Testament. But in Hebrews 1 and verse 14, he's talking, I believe, about the existence of angels. He's just talking about what are angels? Aren't they ministering spirits sent out to render service? I think it's talking about the old and new law. And so I've never limited it in context to only the angel's work in the old law. Yeah. He seems to be writing to his readers and saying, here's what the summation of here's what an angel does. Is he not sent out to render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation? So I do not take it as limited to the Old Testament work of angels.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
David Jordan.
My brother, I want to thank you for your thoughts on angelic beings. I think you did a great job. I really have two questions and just one statement. A couple of years ago, I received a phone call from a brother from a local congregation that I was attending. And he said, "Hey, Brother David, I need your help." I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Hey, I just received a phone call from the prison. They're releasing an inmate. And they've dropped him off here at this hotel. And it happened to be a Wednesday. And the request was that he would like to be picked up from someone from the Church of Christ because he was converted to Christianity in prison." And I'm talking about prison. "And he wants to go to church, and then he's going to take a bus, and he's going to head down to the valley." He said, "Hey, bro, I'm not able to do it. Could you go pick him up?" I said, "I'd be more than willing to do that." He said, "There's one caveat. He's a big black man." I said, "Okay, I'm black. Like, what are we talking about, right?" But he said he's big, right? He's a big human being. I said, "Oh, okay." So I pulled up. This man was like 6'8", 300 pounds. He could have snapped my neck at any moment. No doubt. And so I picked him up, and he gets in the car starts to lean, and I was like, "Yeah, this is a big guy." He just got out of prison. And he looked at me, I looked at him, and he said, "Hey, are we going to church?" I said, "You know what? Church doesn't start until 7:30. We're going to have to go to my home." And I took him to my house, and I called him brother. And I sat down and I fed him, and he was just looking at me and looking at my family the whole time. This man, it was 7:30. We left at 7. We go to church, and he's praising the Lord. We get in my car, and I drive him to the Greyhound. And I said, "Hey, brother, best wishes, man. Here's my number. If you have any questions, man, I know you just got converted." And he looked at me, and he said, "Why in the heavens did you first ever come pick me up, knowing who I am and what I look like?" And I said, "Brother, that's Hebrews 13:1. Let brotherly love continue. For some have entertained angels unwittingly." I said, "I don't know who you are." Yeah. And so my first question to you is, in Hebrews 13, I do believe in the providential hand of God. Is that something, I'm not saying he was an angel. I don't know that. He didn't tell, I'm saying, is there a sense that, hey, you know what, we do need to be careful how we treat strangers, because it could be a test from God. Is that something that would happen today? And also in Psalms 34:7, it says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around all those who fear him and delivers them."
And delivers them. That's right.
I want to know your thoughts on those two.
Yeah. That's a good question. I do think that the word messenger or angelos can be used of human messengers, and how the church is being reminded there to practice hospitality. Now let me give you a snapshot here. How the early church spread the gospel so quickly over the whole known world, I believe, was visitors, when they would go from town to town, travelers, they would go to the watering hole, is the best way I could put it. And no, it's not a bar. It would be the well in that town. And they would go to this well, and there they would drink. I mean, because that's where, and they would wait for local people to come and invite them home, because you don't have a list of all the hotels, or, Hotel 6 or 12 or whatever it is, to go there. They would go there. And people who wanted to make money in the hospitality would go down to the well at night, pick up visitors that were traveling, and bring them back. And the way the homes were built at that time, the bottom level was animals, second level's where they lived, and then there was the upper room. So that's Jesus was in the bottom. Never mind. The whole point I'm getting at here is that you would invite them, and if you were scared of them, you would make them stay in the manger, down below and everything. And then it would depend on how much confidence you had as to whether you would invite them up or they could sleep on the roof, the upper room. But Christians were told to practice hospitality. Remember to practice hospitality, because you don't know whether you might entertain angels unaware. Well, what that meant was you may entertain preachers that are going to different places to preach the gospel. It could be human messengers. But there's nothing in that passage that would limit that to only humans. They could be any kind of messengers. I believe it could be spiritual angels as well. Now, I don't know how all that works. All I do is practice hospitality. And if you want to come to my house, come on. The door's open. But it's the Lord's house. It's the Lord's refrigerator, But it's not the Lord's Oreos. Those are mine. So you're going to have to check before you eat Oreos. So the whole point I'm getting at here is, I do believe the church needs to practice hospitality. Now, what they would do back then is they would get these people to their homes. They would preach to them and maybe send them on their way as brethren. Now, isn't that a wonderful thing that they could do back then? You had a ready-made thing. Every night, all you had to do was go down to the well and bring a stranger home with you and preach to them. Man, that's the way to spread the gospel. And that's why the early church did spread the gospel that way. And it was very effective. And he told the church, don't forget to practice hospitality. So it could be angels, it could be human. Doesn't matter. Practice hospitality.
Let me go on here, Glenn. We don't have time for your sermon on angels.
Okay.
George, next question.
I just wondered if you would distinguish between cherubim and seraphim, because I don't know what the difference between them are.
Cherubim evidently have wings. They were on the Ark of the Covenant. They created the mercy seat, although I've seen different designs of how that works. But cherubim are always almost warrior angels. They seem to be the ones that have always, a lot of them are pictured with swords in their hands for some reason, to keep the way of the tree of life, to do this, that, or the other. Cherubims are not cute little naked babies. That's all we know. Now, there are different kinds. Seraphim have 6 wings, Isaiah 6, 2 through 6. Have 4. Some cherubim have 4 wings. Ezekiel 1, verse 5 through 18. They had 4 wings and are mentioned, as I said, in Exodus 37 and 9, as having their image on the Ark of the Covenant. So I'm not sure. Some writers, and I don't know if he takes this position in here, he said he's not sure whether cherubims and seraphim are different kinds of angels or different kinds of spiritual creatures altogether. He said they may be different kind altogether rather than just a different kind of angel. But I don't know. Cherubim and seraphim but cherubim are the most common ones because they're pictured on the Ark of the Covenant. They're on the Ark of the Covenant.
Glenn, I had a question, comment based on what David was asking a while ago. I think I do think 1 and 14 is probably talking about angels' administrations in the Old Testament. And the reason is because in verse 2 of chapter 2, he goes on to say, for if the word spoken through angels, and so forth. And then in verse 5, he says, for he has not put the world to come of which we speak in subjection to angels. He had put the first world, that is the world under Moses, in subjection to angels, in the sense that they gave the law or participated in the revelation of the law based on Acts 7:53 and Galatians 3:19, the dispensation of angels. So I think there's some merit for the view that those who will inherit salvation is a reference to those under the law who prospectively would inherit salvation.
I'm familiar with that view. I don't take that view. I think it's bigger than that. But I think in the second chapter he does say, for assuredly he does not give help to angels, but gives help to the descendants of Abraham. That word gives help means extends a helping hand. And what he's saying is Christ, there is nothing in Christ that would help sinful angels, the angels that sin. They don't have any access to the grace that's found in Jesus. Obviously, in the first part of chapter 2, he's saying that the Old Testament was one that was to be considered. The angels helped in the transmission of it. But in these last days has spoken unto us by his Son. He's making a contrast that Christ is superior to that which is the angels help bring under the old law. But whenever he's talking about the work of angels, he seems to be, if I'm not incorrect, I think this is in the tense where he's talking about this is what they are doing. In other words, this is something that is present. I may be wrong. I didn't bring my notes on that, but he seems to imply that the angels have this render service for the sake of those who will inherit salvation in any age, old or new.
Melvin.
Appreciate your talk very much. Excellent presentation. In Luke 15 and verse 10, Jesus said, likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repents. And then over in Acts chapter 8, we find the angel of the Lord instructing Philip to go meet this chariot and the Ethiopian eunuch to teach him the gospel. My question, I guess, is just this. Do you think angels are involved in the conversion of sinners? I mean, I don't mean to suggest that he taps us on the shoulder like the angel told Philip, but it seems to me like that the angels are effective at helping us to maybe come in contact with certain people and that kind of thing who will receive the gospel. And I think angels are very interested in evangelism. I think that's implied in these verses. Am I wrong about that or not?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I think that in prayer and providence and promises, any promises, that God's angels are at work in that. And whenever we have an opportunity to confess Christ to somebody, that may have been set up in years or days in advance in order for us to be able to do that. Don't neglect opportunities to practice hospitality and to share the gospel. There is a lot of effort being put forth because God still loves people and he wants to see them saved.
I think a lot of we preachers have had experiences of how we come in contact with certain people that ended up being converted, and we were just amazed how it all took place. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the angels were involved in it, and God was heavily involved in putting us together. Not that anybody told us directly or some miraculous way, but the providence of God, or whatever you would call it, has worked it out that we would meet up with some of those individuals.
I fully agree with that. And in some ways, guys, I just want to throw this in there. Along with my study, and I've got a series on this, I talk about demon possession and what does it mean to exorcise a demon and all that other stuff. There's a prophecy in the Old Testament where he said whenever the Messiah comes, that the prophet would leave the land, and so would the evil spirits. There's not a lot of passages in the Old Testament that deal with demon possession. Almost all of them happened during the time of Christ, and the book of Colossians makes a big point of telling us that it is to demonstrate the superiority of Christ in the spiritual realm over demons. It makes that point. And so all I'm telling you is that there's something going on. There's a lot of work and effort being put forth here to show the superiority of Christ in our realm and in the spiritual realm. And we need not overlook that.